We've touched on it a few times before. I think that everything in business and in life is unfortunately our fault as the leader and in our own life. And so it's important to look at, some of the more self-aware, and intrinsic things in life to help us be more successful in business and in life. I'm Stephen Taylor. This is Weekly ST. For the last 10 years, I've been building a couple $1 million IT cybersecurity company here in Chicagoland, and I'm fascinated with living a wholly successful life. Please join us every single week where we talk about all this and more. Like, share, and subscribe. It's the Thanksgiving holiday, and I think, it's the one time a year that we're all forced probably to, reflect and give gratitude and things like that. Well, the more that I've read about this and the more I'm, trying to become self-aware and grow, gratitude really should be this daily practice that we have. And sometimes it's difficult, right? Being an entrepreneur, being in IT and technology is a minefield. There are often days that have big challenges and it can be hard to be grateful for things. But in everything I've read, super important to do so. One of the things I just stumbled on, Mark Manson was talking about how our mind is always in comparison mode, right? We're always thinking about, well, what if I had this? Well, what if I accomplished that? He says to kind of flip that on its head in the sense of you probably can't shut that down completely, right? Or it's very difficult. It will take a long period of time. Well, why don't you just compare to what you don't? What you're not suffering with, how you're in a better place than what could be. What if I was homeless? What if I, didn't have any money? What if, we didn't have any customers? What if we didn't have any employees? And then it brings back that kind of gratefulness of like, wow, we do have a team. Wow, I do have a roof over my head. Wow, we were able to pay the mortgage this month. All of these things, right? Because 98% of us in this world are very blessed. And we have more than what we need. So he challenges you to go after the comparison mindset with, a negative. What if this was the case, right? And it will actually bring some more gratitude to the forefront of your mind. Sometimes our disappointment comes from I call it the delta between expectation and reality, right? We think, oh, my business should be bigger. I should, a lot of shoulds in life. And then instead of coming from a place of gratefulness or happy with what we have and what we've accomplished, we often are pining or hopeful for something else, right? We're looking for what's next, me included, right? All the time I have this double-edged sword of, what drives me is also what challenges me in that, I've accomplished something and I've already moved on to what's next, right? So it's the thing that drives me, but it's also the thing that drives me nuts because it doesn't give me a lot of opportunity to celebrate the wins or kind of come from that grateful place of, wow, we accomplished this. We made it. We did this or I did this, right? I'm often on to, hey, what's next? And really that's this, here's the expectation, here's the reality of where we're at, and this delta in between leaves us potentially unhappy. And so, this stuff, if we kind of look to rewire our brains, can give us a lot of gratitude and happiness in the moment versus thinking, in our society really breaks us into, well, if you could do this, if you can get there, right? And so it's always like out in front of us versus why can't we be happy with what we have and who we are today? This year has probably been the biggest case of should be's, right? I think as 2020 started, a lot of us had, our plan and everything was rocking and rolling and the economy was good and life was good and we all had this vision, dream, plan, etc. of what life was going to look like. And everything changed for a lot of different reasons. And I know for myself included, right, I kept looking at what should have been, what should be, right? And instead, learning to react to the reality, trying to be happy and grateful for the small things in life, became more evident this year probably than ever, right? And again, those expectations, a lot of people, I think so many weddings and marriages were disrupted this year, right? And people had to adjust, and maybe they did a virtual or a Zoom wedding, or maybe they just did the shotgun wedding and whatever. And again, our mind and our society has this should be of what a wedding should look like and what should be involved and all those things. But really at the core of it, isn't it just the person that you care about and being with them and, making this commitment, right? It's pretty straightforward and simple if you boil it down to the core importance of it. And some people found great love and joy in that, and others were, stuck in this should be mentality of, what it's supposed to look like instead of just pushing forward anyway. Mark in a recent video also talked about, we're all looking for this, maybe this big life purpose and stuff like that. And again, we're very blessed. Life is easier than, it ever has been, for the last hundreds or thousands of years, right? I started to ask the question of myself, what if our purpose didn't have to be so grandiose, or we didn't always have to be looking for the next best thing, right? What if life was about, choosing happiness, giving back, and being a good human, right? What if we all just started there, and then, maybe we worried or challenge ourselves with, some higher purpose or some bigger impact thing. I think those things are important, of course, but, if we all started with a baseline and could, feel fulfilled and be happy with those simple things, how much better would we be able to show up in our businesses, in our life, in our families, so on and so forth.